So yeah, that's our reference. We're also going to add in a new function called Preload, which is going to allow us to load the data from the images before we try to draw them. And this is going to bring up an important concept in programming, which is like loading our assets. So when you're making a website or a piece of software, you want to make sure that the stuff that you're using in that website, like fonts or images or sounds, are actually loaded into the computer's memory before you try to draw them or do stuff with them. Otherwise, you'll get errors or you'll get things that don't work. So that's another thing that we'll be covering as we add media into our sketch. So here's our kind of like basic setup. So I'm going to do a demo of this. I'm going to go to the editor and create a new project for this. So I'm going to log in. And so we need an image. So I'm going to save this as image example spring 2022. And so I'm just going to put a comment here. Okay, so this is my image example. And I'll put the date, March 9th. And so of course we need an actual image to work with. And so you could take a photo and upload it from your phone, or you could find something on the internet. I'm going to go to Google Images, so I'll just go to images.google.com. And one thing that I want to do when I'm searching for an image to use in a project like this is make sure that it has a Creative Commons license. And so that's pretty easy to do now. Google has search tools that will help you do that. So let's say I want to add a cat into my sketch. You can see there's a lot of images of cats, but some of these images of cats are going to be copyright or licensed, and I don't really want to pay to use them. So what I'm going to do is go to Tools in the Google search and go to Usage Rights and go to Creative Commons Licenses. And so this way I can use these images without having to pay for them. I don't really want to pay 20 bucks for a cat image for this project. So I'm just going to use a Creative Commons image. And so I can look around and find something that, goes along with what I'm trying to work with. There's a lot of like photos. I could use a cartoon. I could also, if you wanted to make something on your computer in Photoshop or something like that, that would be fine. I'm just going to go with this first one. It looks pretty good. And so I'll open this up, and this is a Wikimedia, so we can see it'll probably have a license somewhere. So this is Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. And so that means that if you want to use this in a project, you have to give credit to the person who created it. And usually if you click on this, it'll give you more information. So yeah. So this is a slightly restrictive license, so it's good to be aware of these things. If you're creating a project for class, you can't really get in trouble for this stuff. I think like student work is not necessarily something that you're going to get sued over, but it's good to be aware of this stuff if you are going to use this in the future. So this says I can copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format, and I can adapt it. And under the following terms, I have to give appropriate credit to the person who made the image, and I have to use the same license. So that's actually an interesting one. This says I'm only allowed to use this if I apply the same license to it. So anything that I create based on this image, I have to also let people use the share alike license. So it's good to be aware of those rules. And one thing I'll typically do once I find an image, I'm just going to save a link to the image where I found it, so I can go back and reference that information in the future. So even though I'm not going to use this to actually load my image, although I could, actually maybe we can go over that because there's two ways to do it. But I'm just going to make a note here and say this is where I got my cat image. And I also will link to the license. So that way, you know, if they delete this image or something like that, I can always say, you know, here's the license that the original image was under. And then the license also requires me to give attribution, so I should make sure to save the author's name. Okay, so there's the author. So I'm just going to copy that and put it here. So that way, if, you know, they delete the image, but I still use it, I can't get in trouble because I'll remember who they are and I can give them attribution. This is a link, so it goes to, oh, it's just their user page on Wikipedia. Okay. So then you can see under the image, depending on the search engine you're using, you'll see like different sizes. And so I'm not going to need like a huge size. Like the biggest one is really, really big. It's probably like 10 megabytes or something like that. That's going to take a while for the image to load. So I don't really want to use one that's that big. 600 by 600 is probably pretty good. Like most of my sketches that I make are like, you know, in that range. So I think 600 by 600 is fine. So I'll click on that one. And then I can actually reference this link right here. So I'm going to copy that as well. And I'll use both just to show as an example. But then I'm going to download it. So I have a copy of it. So one thing with the internet is this could disappear at any moment. So you know, if I want to have a project that I know is always going to work, I want to actually save this image. So I'm going to click Save Image As. And I just want to put it somewhere where I can find it because I'm going to upload it to my project. So Downloads folder is fine. And I'll just click Save. And I can't see the X. Let's move this. Okay, over there. Okay. All right. So I've got my image. So if I want to upload my image, I need to go over to my file system. So I'm going to click on the little arrow right here. And all of my files have these like little down arrows that give me some options. So like index.html, I can rename it or delete it. And in my sketch files, I can click on this and create a folder, create a file, or upload a file. So if I wanted to make a folder, if I had like a ton of images that I was using and I wanted to organize them in different folders, I could do that. If I want to create a new file, like an HTML or JavaScript file, I can use create file. But what I want to do is upload a file, so I'm going to click upload. And then I can either drag and drop or just click on this area to add my image. So I'm going to click on there and go to my downloads folder where I can find my image and click on there and click open. And that's going to take a second to upload. It's 0.5 megabytes, which is actually pretty big for this type of image, but it is like a photo, so there's a lot of detail in there. So that's okay. I don't think it's going to be an issue. And so now I have a copy of my image. It has kind of a long name, so if I wanted to rename it, I could just change the name to cat.png, so I don't have to worry about spelling the name wrong. And so now I can add it into my sketch. So I'll go back to sketch.js. And so now we're going to actually add our image. Any questions on any of that process before we add our code? Okay. All right, so there's a couple things I need to do. I need to get a variable to use as a reference for my image, because I'm going to preload the data from the image in my preload function. And so if I want to be able to use the image in my draw function, I need a reference, a global reference that I can, you know, reference inside of draw. So I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it cat image. And I'm not going to assign anything to it. So I'm just declaring the variable. I'm just saying this variable exists. So then to load my image, I'm going to add a new function. So that's the function I mentioned, preload. And if you don't have this function, it just ignores it. But if you do have the function, P5 is going to call that function. And it's going to wait until all the load calls that you do finish. And then it's going to call the setup function. And you'll see a little loading sign while that's happening. So I'm going to take my cat image, and I'm going to say cat image equals load image. And then here's where I can use either the local reference. So that's a better one to use, but I'll show the external reference as well. So for the local reference, I didn't actually put it in a folder, so I can just use cat.png. If I put it in a folder, I would say, folder name / cat.png. So I just have to put this in quotation marks because it is a string style data. And then just to show that this works, in my draw function, I'm just going to say image. And the image argument, or the image function, let's put a little space down here. The first argument is my image data. Okay, so the cat image, so the image itself is a file. And when we say load image, we're loading all the data from that file into the browser memory so that we can draw those pixels, draw the image data on the canvas. And so the cat image is actually a reference to all of that data. And it has some other information built into it as well, like the width and height of the image. So for the image, I can say cat image. And then if I want to draw it at 0, 0, I can just say 0, 0 here. And then hit play. Did I get an error? Yes, I did. Okay, it says there's a problem. Oh, I put JPEG instead of PNG. Whoops. PNG. There we go. So we see our cat image. It's a little bit bigger than the canvas, but we can adjust that in a second. So that's the local file. If you wanted to use a external file for whatever reason, like maybe you have your own image server or you have some stuff on like Imgur or something like that, I could actually use this link as well. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. I think that'll work. Let's give it a try. I think it'll look the same. Yeah. So I can reference the external version of the image if I want to. But for this example, I'm just going to use the local version. So I'm going to comment out this line. And I'll say external link. All right, so we've got our image. So it takes a little bit more setup, but it's not too hard. And so now we can add images. We can add as many copies of this image as we want to. And we can add as many different images as we want to. We just have to assign them to different variables. So I can draw this image multiple times. Like if I do image again and say cat image and I move it, it's going to draw both of them. And I can do that as many times as I want. If I tried to do it like 1,000,000 times, it might start to slow down, but a couple times is pretty easy. So let's look at what else we can do with our image. This isn't really relevant because we're using the web editor, so this whole section we can just skip. This is when I used to just use Sublime Text and GitHub and stuff, but so let's look at the arguments for the image. So obviously the first two arguments are the X and Y position. And we can put variables in there just like we did with our other examples. So I could put mouse X, mouse Y here. And now we can move our image with the mouse. You can see the default for the image is that top left corner. But if I wanted it to be centered, I can say image mode centered, just like I can with my rectangle. So now the image is centered on the mouse. And so I can create some, interactivity that way by moving the image around. And I can do all the same like animations and interactions that I could do with my shapes using mouse X, mouse Y, or other parts of our browser. So I can also control the width and the height of the image. I'm going to turn image mode off for a second. And so when we draw our image at 0, 0, since the canvas is smaller than the image, it gets cropped. So we could distort the image. So if I change, actually I have to leave 0, 0 here, but if I add width to the end, it's going to change the width of the image. So you can see it's like squishing the image into the canvas. And then if I put height there, now it's fit inside the canvas. So that actually works mostly because my image actually already is a square. It's 600 by 600 pixels. But if, for example, I had a canvas that was taller, it's going to stretch out the image. So that actually doesn't really look all that noticeable, but you can see, the image is getting a little bit distorted. But it does a decent job of that. And if I wanted it not to do that, I could use, I know that the image is square, so I could just say width by width, and I could center it. Maybe I could say it's like height over 2. I can, oh, whoops, that's too far. How far would I need to go? Oh, because it's not centered. So it would be height over 4. No, that's not even right. 400, oh, I guess it would just be 100, so it's the difference. Yeah. Anyway, you can kind of manipulate to fit the image inside of the canvas, even if it doesn't actually match the dimensions of the canvas. And then we can also make the width and height of the image interactive. So I could put mouse X and mouse Y for the width and the height. And so now I can actually change the size of the image interactively or animating it or something like that. So there's a bunch of different stuff I can do to manipulate the image. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. All right, so we just have a couple more things to look at. So another thing we can do is tint the image. So the image has a lot of color data in it, and if we want to change those colors, we can use the tint function. There's a couple other functions like this that we can also explore. If we go to the reference, or let's see. Yeah, so we can also do filters and blends and that stuff, but let's just look at the tint first. So I'll set this back to just 0, 0. So if we want to tint the image, we can do a tint, and then whatever color we are going to put in there is going to be blended with the actual color data. So for example, if I put like a gray color, it's going to make everything darker. If I put like a bright red color, so 25500, so a lot of red and no green and blue. So now we get a red tinted image. It's adding the red. So in parts that are darker, the image is still dark, but in parts where the image is bright, it becomes red. So we could add some blue in there, get this kind of cool combination, and then we could also do, we could break that into 2 parts. So I could take part of this image and do red, part of it and do blue, and then I can also add transparency. So if I said like, what would the, like 127, so it's like half transparent on both of these, and then maybe I'll offset one by a little bit. you can create kind of a cool effect. You can, you know, blend them together in different ways, or I could just put this at mouse X and make it interactive. So I can blend the colors together. So there's a few different effects that I can do. The effects are a little bit more processor heavy, so if you add like a lot of them on there, you'll start to see the program will slow down a little bit, but you can get some cool effects that way. There's a couple other ones. Let's try, I'm going to turn this one off for a second and just do a blend. So we can do a blend, and this is going to do different mathematical operations on the pixels. Let's see, there's a few different options here. Although there's a lot of parameters. But I think I can maybe I just need blend mode and not, let's see, blend mode. Yeah, I think what I really want is just blend mode. So the blend function gives me a little bit more control over like what part of the image is being blended. But if I just want to blend the whole thing, I can do something like this. So there's a bunch of different options here. I'm going to choose, I think, overlay will be a good one. Some of them are just going to like it'll just be like completely black or completely white. But what it's doing is it's going to like either add the pixel colors together or multiply them or do other things. But right now it doesn't look like anything's happening. So let's try multiply. Yeah, it's probably crashing. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think it can really, I think this is like too much for that amount of data. Let's try another function. Let's try filter. So we have some different filters as well that could be interesting to add on here. So it gives some different options. Again, these are just like mathematical operations that are being applied to all the pixels in the data or in the image. So we could like do a blur. Let's see. So let's see, the blur. Radius of 1. So if we add in a blur here, or no, filter, blur, the default should just be like 1. So yeah, you can see it slowing way, way down when we're adding this filter in here. Like as I move the mouse, the image is moving really slowly. So the performance of these effects is not that great, but let's see what it looks like if I increase the blur a bunch. Yeah, it's slowing way, way down. I'll just take out the second cat image altogether. Okay, now I think it's crashing, so I'm gonna okay. Just reload that. Okay. So those filters exist. The performance is not great, so we'll just move on. But they might be fun to play with. If you're on a nicer computer than this, they might work better. And then one last thing that we can do that might be fun to create some different types of interactions with your images is we can actually get the pixel color of the image. So let's actually make the whole sketch larger. And so I'm going to get the pixel color of the mouse. So I'll say variable C for color, and then I'll just say get mouse X, mouse Y. Or do I have to put it? Yeah, no, that's all I have to do. And then I'm going to do a fill C, and I'm just going to draw a big circle so we can just see what color is under the mouse. So I'll do like mouse X for the circle position, mouse Y, and then I'll do like 50 pixels for the size. And so now you can see as I'm going around the image, it's showing me what the color is there. And so there's a lot of cool stuff I could do with that. Like I could take out all the colors and make a design based on the color scheme. Like with this cat, you know, maybe use like the pink and the blue and the green or something like that. Or I could do, you know, different interactions where you compare the colors or, you know, do different stuff with the color data inside the image. So this is just a pretty simple example to show, let's make it even bigger, that we can pull that data out using that get function. So there's a lot of different things you could do with that. Let's see. So yeah, one thing I'll do one quick example of something that would be cool with that. So if I actually don't even display the cat image, or no, how would I do this? I think I still have to display the cat image. But maybe if I take out the background. No, because I'm still drawing. Oh, you know what? I would need to like save all of the dots. That's a little more complicated than what we're ready for yet, but that's okay. So I think this is enough for now. So you guys can work on just adding your image. And so ultimately, for this assignment, for this project, you want to have something that has both an image and some text in the same canvas. So if you want to keep working with the text that we started on Monday, you can do that, or you could just work with the image and add text later. I'll go over next week like a couple different ways that you might want to combine them. But for now, you can just play with putting them into the canvas and styling them and you know, seeing how they look together. And just to kind of recap the project, so you can do a logo or a meme or anything that combines text and image. I used to just do a logo for this, but not everybody has like a logo design that they want to do. So a meme is also a good option for combining text and images, but you could also just, you know, make something completely original. For the first version of this, we're just going to use, it's just going to be a rough draft. So it doesn't have to be interactive, it doesn't have to be animated. The only sort of like technical requirement is that the project should use at least 2 variables. So that should be pretty easy if you just have an XY variable for where the text is, where the image is, or if you have some size variables. But I just want you, you know, with image and text, you don't necessarily need to use variables to make a project that looks good, but it's good to keep that practice going because we are going to need variables for the next couple weeks when we start doing our interactive version and our animation version. All right. Any questions? Cool.
Can we see the last lines that you did? How to get the color pixel?
Oh yeah.
It's not working.
It's not.
It's not working.
Okay, I'll take a look at your. Yeah.